Under the soft golden glow of the Oval Office, President Joe Biden sat in deep thought at his desk, his seasoned eyes fixed on the faint lights outside the window. It was late, but his mind was still tangled in the nation's problems. A soft knock on the door pulled him back to reality. His aide stepped in, looking slightly hesitant. "Sir, there's a young lawyer here to see you. He says it's something very important." Biden raised an eyebrow. Who would come to him at this hour with such urgency? He gave a nod, signaling to let the visitor in. The door opened, and a young man strode in. His face was bright, his eyes burning with passion, and in his hands was a thick folder. "Mr. President, I know it's late, but I believe this plan could change the lives of millions," he said firmly, without a hint of hesitation. Biden studied him in silence. He had met many young people with big ambitions, but there was something about this one that made him pay closer attention. "Take a seat," Biden said, his tone both serious and curious. "You've got 5 minutes to convince me." The young lawyer took a deep breath and opened the folder. Inside was a new policy proposal aimed at protecting the rights of the working class, giving those struggling with minimum wage a fair chance at a decent life. He spoke about workers losing jobs to automation, families drowning in medical expenses, and children growing up without access to proper education. His voice carried both frustration and an unshakable belief in a more just future. Biden listened, and without realizing it, he saw a reflection of his younger self, the young man who once stood before powerful politicians, driven by the same burning desire to change the world. He remembered the sleepless nights, the sacrifices made for his career, and all the moments he had questioned whether he was on the right path. When he was young, Joe Biden was a man filled with big dreams. Growing up in Delaware, he always longed to make life better for the hard-working people around him. As a student, he carried a notebook everywhere, jotting down thoughts, lessons from political debates, and bold plans for a fairer America. He remembers the days he spent roaming windy streets, going from neighborhood to listen to people's struggles. He met workers who were exhausted but still couldn't afford to support their families, elderly folks struggling with medical bills, and young dreamers who had no real opportunities to rise. It was these very people who pushed him toward politics, even though he knew it wouldn't be an easy path. In his early years as a senator in Delaware, he faced a lot of doubt. A young man with little political experience, could he really make a difference? But Joe never let that stop him. He learned from those who came before him, but he wasn't afraid to challenge outdated ways of thinking. With persistence and determination, he slowly proved that he wasn't just another ambitious young politician. He was someone who truly wanted to change the lives of millions of Americans. In 1985, as Joe Biden's political career was gaining momentum, an unexpected financial crisis hit, throwing his family into unprecedented hardship. Despite being a promising young senator, he had never cared about accumulating personal wealth. To him, politics wasn't a way to get rich, it was a way to serve the people. But then, a bad investment made by a close friend cost the Biden family most of their savings. Nearly all his money had gone into supporting an affordable housing project in Delaware, a project he believed would provide stable homes for working families. However, due to market shifts and miscalculations from his partners, the project collapsed, leaving behind a mountain of unforeseen debt. One late night, Joe sat alone in his small kitchen, staring at the stack of financial papers in front of him. Overdue bills, bank notices, warnings from creditors, it all felt suffocating. He had always believed his job was to protect the vulnerable from poverty. Yet now, he was the one facing the risk of losing everything. He asked himself, can I keep doing politics when I'm struggling, just to keep my own life together? That thought haunted him for months. There were moments when he felt like a failure, not just as a politician, but as a father, as the backbone of his family. Advice from friends didn't help. Some told him to use his political influence to seek help from wealthy donors. But Joe Biden couldn't do that. He knew that if he accepted money from special interest groups, he'd owe them, and that meant compromising the ideals he had always stood for. After everything that had shaken his life, Joe Biden realized he had only two choices: walk away from it all or rise from the ashes. He chose the second option. The losses and hardships didn't make him bitter or pessimistic. Instead, they deepened his understanding of pain and the fragility of life. If politics had once been a passionate race of youth for him, it was now a heavy yet meaningful responsibility. He was no longer chasing power for personal success or recognition. He was fighting for the people who needed a real leader to stand up for them. When he returned to the Senate, Joe was no longer the eager young man trying to prove himself. He became more measured, a better listener, and more determined to push for policies that truly mattered. His years of financial struggle gave him an even deeper empathy for working families, those trying to keep up with bills, rent, and their children's futures. In a speech before Congress, he once said, "I know what it's like to be a father, choosing between buying medicine or putting food on the table. I know the anxiety of looking at your bank account at the end of the month. And I will never let other families go through that if there's something I can do to change it." From then on, he became one of the strongest voices for the working class, advocating for financial reforms and middle-class support. But even as he returned to politics, Joe Biden never forgot what mattered most: his family. He had to raise his two young sons on his own. He knew that if he focused only on his career and neglected them, he'd lose everything that truly mattered. So he made a choice that few politicians dared to make. He put his family on equal footing with his career. Every day, Joe Biden took the Amtrak train from Delaware to Washington, D.C. for work, then returned home every night. For over 30 years, he stuck to this routine, refusing to move to the Capitol because he didn't want to be away from his kids. Every morning, he got up early, made breakfast for them, took them to school, and only then caught his train to the Senate. On those long train rides, he didn't just read policy briefings, he also called his sons to ask how their tests went or if they needed help with homework. Joe once told a reporter, "There were nights I got home at 9 p.m. exhausted after a long day, but when I opened the door, my son was still up, waiting for me. And in that moment, I knew, no matter how busy I was, being a father would always be my most important job." His daily train rides became more than just a routine. They became a symbol of his balance between family and career. Amtrak employees got used to seeing Joe Biden sitting quietly by the window, sometimes scribbling notes on a document, other times laughing as he talked to fellow passengers about his family. Joe Biden leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful as he looked at the young man in front of him. This wasn't just a discussion about policy anymore. It had become a conversation between two generations. One had weathered life's storms while the other was just stepping onto a path filled with challenges. The young lawyer, his eyes burning with passion yet tinged with uncertainty, hesitated before speaking. "Sir, after hearing your story, I can't help but wonder, is this path really worth it? Is politics truly the best way to create change, or is it just a cycle of power and compromise?" Joe Biden smiled, a knowing smile, one of understanding and empathy. He had been in that same place before, uncertain, questioning, afraid of losing himself in the political world. He spoke slowly, deliberately. "Politics is a tough road. I'll never deny that. It will demand a lot from you, your time, your energy, even the things you cherish most. But there's one thing you must never forget. You are not walking this path alone." His gaze locked onto the young lawyers, sharp yet warm. "You will have people by your side, family, friends, those who share your vision. And most importantly, you will have the people you are fighting for. When you feel exhausted, think of them. When you start doubting yourself, remember why you began." Joe lightly tapped his fingers on the table as if carefully choosing his next words. There are three things I want you to remember. He raised one finger. First, understand that politics is not a path to fame or power. If you enter this world just to be remembered, you will fail. Real power isn't about ruling over people, it's about serving them. You are not the most important person in the room. The people you represent are. A second finger went up. Second, you will have to make sacrifices, but don't let those sacrifices become meaningless. This job will take a lot from you: time with family, peaceful nights of sleep, sometimes even your sense of security. But always hold on to what truly matters. If you lose yourself along the way, then you've already lost. Finally, he raised three fingers. Third, be persistent. You will fail. People will doubt you. There will be days when you want to give up. But real change never happens overnight. If you truly believe in something, keep fighting for it. And never forget, those who make a difference aren't the ones who never fall, but the ones who keep getting back up. The young lawyer remained silent, letting Joe's words sink in. Outside the window, the city lights shimmered in the night. The air in the room felt still, charged with unspoken resolve. The young man clenched his fists, a new determination in his eyes. He took a deep breath, then nodded firmly. I understand. I still want to take this path, but I'll do it my way and I won't lose sight of what truly matters. Joe Biden smiled. Then start tomorrow. You've got work to do. The young lawyer stood up and shook Joe's hand. Not just a handshake, but a commitment. A new generation was ready to carry forward the fight that those before them had devoted their lives to. And deep in his heart, Joe Biden knew that while he wouldn't be on this path forever, the ideals he had fought for would never fade. They would live on in young leaders willing to stand up and fight for a better world.